Hi guys, this is part 2 of my pregnancy journey. This is my journey with Molly. The part 1 is about my 2 pregnancy losses that I had before when I was trying to conceive. So, oh, I didn't mention in that one, I lost my second pregnancy they measured it to be 7 weeks, 6 days, so I was basically 8 weeks when I lost it, and I was almost 6 weeks when I lost the first one. So, to recap, that happened. I had never seen a heartbeat on the monitors at all, so that sucked. But, so, like I was saying in the last video, my HCG didn't drop very fast after my second pregnancy loss. It was dropping, but just not like super fast, and so I had to keep giving blood, and they eventually did an ultrasound to make sure there was nothing there, but I was on my period when that happened. Surprise, I was not expecting to have a period, especially only a month after I stopped bleeding. So that cleaned out whatever was stuck in there keeping the HCG from dropping. So March 8th I had my blood drawn and my HCG was finally negative, so that's where we left off. So I'm like, sweet, I can try to conceive again because I want a baby so bad and nothing is going to keep me from having a baby because, oh my gosh. And I was, by then, was thankful that I knew I was fertile, so I didn't have infertility problems. I just had a hard time, keeping the pregnancy. So, middle of March, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I feel nothing, my boobs are flat, I'm just like, can't wait for something to happen. I remember very clearly saying that, and then the next day, I suddenly got really, really thirsty and really, really hungry, which are my two big PMS symptoms. And so I was like, "Oh, sweet! I'm about to pop an egg. Let's try to conceive." So I really started to really try. We hit the bed room. So I did that. I mean, I had definitely not okay, so I definitely had been having sex, but I wasn't just trying to conceive until then. But around that time, I was like, okay, let's do this, and so we hit the bedroom, and I started to definitely feel like I was PMSing. I was a bottomless pit. I'd eat so much, and it would just I wouldn't feel full. It was just I could pack down these huge meals. So the end of March is my birthday, and so I went out and stuffed my face and all this, and I was like, man, it would be so nice to be pregnant on my birthday. What a good birthday present, especially because my first pregnancy, I did get a due date, and it was in April. So that was approaching, and I was like, I want to be pregnant by the time that rolls around. And I'd love to be pregnant my birthday, but I didn't know. And oh, my sister, who is handicapped, for those that don't know yet, we told her both times I was pregnant. We also told her both times that I had lost the baby, was no longer pregnant, and she looks at me and she's like, "You'll have a baby this year," meaning 2013, and I believed her. And I was like, that means I need to get pregnant by April, at the latest. But I was like, I believed her. I clung on to the fact. I was like, I believe my sister. When she said stuff like that, I believe her, and so I was like, I am gonna have a baby in 2013. So after my birthday, right after my birthday, I got sick again, really sick. Another 10-day cold. I had a 10-day cold right before I found out I was pregnant the second time, and the same thing was happening. And I started having so many dreams that I was pregnant, which is something I didn't have with my second pregnancy, which is the first red flag I knew something was wrong. And suddenly I was just flooded with pregnancy dreams. I had a lot. And I was like, I think I'm pregnant. And then I started salivating a ton. All three of my pregnancies, I got this pain in one of my digits. And I don't know what that's about, but it happened all three times I was pregnant. So I was like, this is happening again. And I was just like, a couple more things. I was really tired and all this stuff. I thought I was pregnant. I was like, maybe I am pregnant and not just PMSing. I think the egg took or whatever. I don't know when I was going to or if I had ovulated. So, but I got really sick and I lost my voice again. I had a fever. I left work early, and I actually April 4th, I called out and I said I have laryngitis. I can't do my job. My job is I transcribe And to do that, I use the Dragon software, so I dictate instead of type. So with laryngitis, I can't do that, especially because it felt like I was forcing stuff out of like a tiny little pinhole. So I stayed home, and I was going to go to urgent care to get like a inhaler or something just to make it go away because I have this job. I would not like to be out of work. By now I'm full time because I realized I wasn't having a baby like as soon as I thought. So I went to full time at work. So I had to worry about like actual sick leave and stuff. And I had just enough to take one day off, so I was like, I better heal myself now. So that was a Thursday. I took it off. It was April 4th. And when I woke up, I called out. But then I felt better enough that I decided not to go to urgent care because it costs a lot of money. And if I was feeling like I was on the upswing, I didn't want to go. And also, when I was going to go to urgent care, I was going to ask them to do a pregnancy test because I didn't know if I was pregnant or not. I was fairly sure I was, but I was so like afraid that I didn't want to test myself because I was like so scared. I thought that if I like knew I was pregnant that I was going to lose it because the last two pregnancies I lost the pregnancy a month after I found out, so I wanted to put off finding out as long as I could, but I had to find out because I knew I had to find out what I could take medicine wise. So instead of going to urgent care, I drove to my parents' house, which is this house. It was still theirs, but it was almost ours. We bought this house the end of April, moved in beginning of May. So, um, so I come here instead, and my mom's home. My dad was, I don't know where he was, but my mom was here, and so I came over and was like hanging out, and I was like, told her all this about like taking a pregnancy test, and she's like, well, you still have a pregnancy test left over from when you bought it last time, because I had bought a 2-pack, and I was like, oh yeah, you're right. And she's like, you want to take it? And I was like, no, but I probably should just in case I do end up going to urgent care. So I was like scared out of my mind. I had filmed like all the pregnancy tests, but I didn't even bother to film this one because I was so scared that if I like paid attention to the pregnancy that it would end. Like that's how I had PTSD from losing my two pregnancies, and I was just like beside myself like with anxiety. So I was terrified, but I went into the bathroom over, and my mom went with me, and the way the bathroom is, there's a door that separates the toilet from the like sink, but they're like on the same wall. So I sit down on the toilet and I pee on the stick instead of putting it in a glass because I didn't have one. So I peed on the stick, and I like reached over like around the door, like around the little wall, and I put it on the counter. And I was like fumbling. I was like really scared, so I was like fumbling around trying to like like wipe. And also my mom was just like, oh, and I was like, it's positive, huh? And so I finished pulling up my pants, and I like turn the corner and I look, and it was the darkest plus I've ever seen in my life. It showed up positive so fast that the control line wasn't even soaked yet. Like it was still, my pee was still traveling there. And it was the EPT, that has the plus, and then there's like the additional line. That's what it was. And it was like dark positive, and I was just like, okay. And I wasn't even happy. I wasn't even excited because I was so like scared. Like that's how wrecked it made me to lose two pregnancies. So I didn't even bother getting excited. I was just like, oh my gosh. Like all I could think about was like, how am I gonna get through the next 2 months without having a nervous breakdown? Because I was so scared that I was just gonna lose it again. So I was like, oh my gosh, I am not telling a soul. And so yes, it was positive before I even pulled up my pants. My mom saw it before I did. And now I kind of wish I was filming, but oh well, next time. And I wanted to do pregnancy vlogs. I actually started doing pregnancy vlogs my first pregnancy, but it ended like right after I started. And then the second pregnancy I was too scared because just deep down knew something was wrong. And this time I was just so scared. Also, I didn't know how far along I was, so I didn't bother making them. So I was just like, you know what? I am going to wait 2 months before I even call my midwife because I want to make sure I am 12 weeks along and I don't lose it. I don't want to like have to pay for like care that if it's just gonna die, because I was just like under the mentality that I was just gonna lose it. And um, so I found out on Thursday, and then Saturday and Sunday was general conference for my religion. You can probably guess what it is. And of course, I knew I was pregnant at that point, and so I prayed and was like, okay, if this baby is for reals, please let me know. And I'm still really sick, of course, so I was so sick. So I spent most of general conference sleeping. I missed one session because I had work, and the other three sessions, I fell asleep through all of them, like pretty much all of it. Like I just felt so awful. I knew I was pregnant, and I was just like so fatigued and so sick and so tired. I just fell asleep. And I was just like, I'm not getting an answer. And then, like, the very last talk of Sunday afternoon, I was just like, awake enough to listen to it. And very clearly, I felt like this thought came to my mind, and I felt my heart, and it said, like, your empty arms, because my cat had just died like 2 months earlier, so my arms were empty. I had nothing to take care of. It was like, your empty arms, they're gonna be filled this time. And I was just like, there's my answer. And I was like, yes. And so I knew the baby was legit. It did not stop me from being absolutely freaked out, but that helped me to like get along. Plus my sister saying, you're gonna have a baby this year. So I started crying. Ben's like, why are you crying? I'm like, cause this baby's legit. And so, April and May went, and it was so long. I was working full time, so it went by like fairly quickly, but I was so scared. Like literally every 5 minutes, like I hallucinated or whatever, thought there was blood running like out of my vagina, and so like every 5 minutes I'd get up and like run to the bathroom and like scrape my vagina basically, and like look at the toilet paper to make sure there was no blood. There was never any blood. I did not have a single drop of blood this pregnancy. Let me just say that right now. So I was just terrified, and it like messed with my mind. And I was just like, what if she dies? What if it dies? Blah blah blah. What if you tell everyone it dies? Like all that freaking anxiety. And I was just like, I got so anxious that I really wanted to take something for it, but I didn't. And so, so June rolls around, beginning of June, and I'm still pregnant. I'm definitely pregnant. I had like really bad morning sickness. I never threw up, but I would gag throughout the day. Like I'd be doing my job, I'd be dictating, and then I would just like stop and just gag and keep going. It was, and the break room smelled bad. And when I saw Hungry Man TV dinners, I wanted to puke. It was just awful. So at the end of April, we moved into this house. My parents moved out of this house. Oh, I'm really hot. Sorry, guys. I'm like sweating. So June rolls around, and I'm like still pregnant. And I am under the impression that I am like 12 weeks, maybe. And so I finally call, and I'm like, hi, I need to make an appointment with my midwife because I'm pregnant. They're like, oh, how far along are you? I'm like, I don't know. My periods aren't regular. And she's like, when was your last period? And I was like, February 20th, and she's just like, there's a pause, and it's like, are you seeing someone for this pregnancy? I'm like, no, I wanted to make sure it didn't die first, because I didn't think to use my period to see how far along it was. And so I was like, I think I'm only like 10 weeks or so. Like, I really hope I'm 12 weeks, but I was really scared that I'd get there and I wouldn't be that far. And one of my dreams, I had a baby, and it was a girl. It was Molly, and the birthday was December 15th. And by the way, her birthday's December 1st. So but that was like too optimistic from when I thought I got pregnant. And so I get there, and I'm terrified they're gonna do a pelvic exam because I did not want to see a drop of blood. Even if I knew it wasn't it was just from like my cervix bleeding, I knew that I would just like have a nervous breakdown, and so I was terrified, and I didn't think I was very far along, so I took my mom instead of my husband to the appointment. So we get there, and I walk in, and I'm terrified. I wake up, and I'm like, what if there's no heartbeat? What if blah blah blah? Because I'd never seen a heartbeat before. Because the first pregnancy it was too early. The second pregnancy she never found one, but she said it was moving, so she didn't rule out that it died. I don't know if it had or not. It definitely died that week, but So this was the third pregnancy, and I was just like terrified there was not gonna be a heartbeat. They were gonna tell me I'm sorry, whatever, even though it was like really obvious. Oh, and at work, I felt something that I'd never felt before, and it felt like a kick, and I just immediately was like, that's the baby kicking. But I was like, no, I'm only like 9 weeks along. It can't be the baby kicking. So that'll be important in a sec. So I go to my appointment, and my blood pressure's a little high because I'm just terrified, and I'm like gonna cry because I was like so scared, and I was like, I don't want a pelvic exam, like I'm so scared. And the nurse was like, okay, we're not gonna do one then if you don't want one. And then my midwife was like, you don't need one anyway. So they took my vitals and everything, and then my midwife comes in. She looks at me and she's like, are you sure you're not further along? Because you look further. Because I was starting to get a little fat. I was gaining a little weight. I didn't realize at the time it was my baby bump. So she's like, no, we don't have to do a pelvic at all, like any internal exam this time. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. And I just instantly felt better. So she's like, are you sure you're not further along? I was like, I don't think so. I don't have any reason to think I'm further along because my HCG was negative on March 8th. So obviously I got pregnant after that. And she's like, okay. And so I lay back and she's like feeling my uterus, and it's like way further up than I thought it was, because my general doctor was like, yeah, around like 10 weeks it'll pop out. And I wasn't really sure what she meant by that. I knew my uterus was like hard. I could feel it. And the second time too, I felt it was hard. But I didn't know where it ended because I had this like little layer of fat like over where my belly button is. And so I didn't think my uterus was like under that, but it was. So she felt my uterus and it was like almost to my belly button. And she's like, oh yeah, you're measuring like, you feel like you're like 16 weeks. And I was like, are you serious? And I was like, well, you're the doctor, of course you'd know. And I joked, I was like, it's twins, but I didn't really think it was. I have a thing for twins, and so I was like hoping it was twins, but and then she's like, no, you don't want twins because then I can't do your care. And I was like, oh, okay, fine. This one, I don't want twins. I was just kind of joking, but I could have had twins because I was further than I thought. So, she's like, well, let's take a look on the ultrasound. And so she had that little informal ultrasound at the office. They do a little informal ultrasound just to like kind of guesstimate how far you are, and then they refer you to people that do that for their jobs, so they have much clearer images and stuff. So she puts the wand on my stomach, and the first thing we see is like this. I thought it was looking like up, but it was actually looking like this. And she's like, oh, you see that? It's looking right at you. And then she moves, and I thought I was gonna see, you know, like an 11 or 12 week like blob head, blob body, blob limbs, maybe a spine. No, what I saw was a skull with teeth in it. I saw a perfect spine, every vertebrae, and big, perfect limbs, perfect feet. I could see its toes, I could see every bone in its body, and this big, strong heartbeat. And I was like, oh my gosh, I am not 12 weeks. I am further than that. And I was just like, I've seen enough ultrasounds on YouTube. I know that's not a 12-week fetus. That is like a 16-week at least. I was like, oh my, I was just absolutely shocked from what I saw because it was so big. And she was like, oh yeah, look, you're way further along. And I was like, how can that be? Because my HCG was negative. So I got pregnant before I tried. I got pregnant like the beginning of March. Like before I was even over all that crap from the last time. So, and this baby was like kicking. It was super active. It had these little feet, little hands. So she took a couple pictures, and I was just like in shock. I was like, are you serious? And she was like, I can't even measure it, because she could like take a picture and kind of measure from the head to the butt, but it was so big that it wouldn't fit on her screen. And so she was like, I don't even know how big you are. We're going to go off your missed period, or off of your last cycle. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I was like, December 15th. And she looks at her little due date thing, and she's like, your due date is November 26th. And I was like, I have a November due date? And I almost started crying because I was just like in shock. So I ended up being 15 weeks and 3 days at that appointment instead of the 12 weeks that I thought. And So I go home, I'm like in shock. And my mom is in shock. I'm just like, I did not know I was that far along. If I knew that, I would have come in a month sooner. I wanted to wait until 12 weeks, not 16. So so I go home, I'm like, babe, guess what? It's twins, lol, just kidding. And I was like, no, I am a month further than I think I am. Which means that when I found out I was pregnant, she was already past the gestational age of my first pregnancy and well on her way to the second. I was out of the first trimester completely. And I was just like, I can tell people, like, the chance that this pregnancy is going to end is super low. And it was the first time I'd seen a heartbeat, and I just so reassured. And now she's awake. Um, so, here she is, by the way. She's been on my lap this whole time. Um, so instead of scheduling me for like a dating ultrasound, I just got scheduled for the anatomy scan, and I had that at 20 weeks. And that's where we found out we were having a girl. And that was the beginning of July. And they're like, "You want to know what you're having?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "It's a girl." I was like, "Oh!" I was so happy. I had no idea because I like didn't want to form an attachment because I thought it was just gonna die, and so I didn't really know one way or the other. My husband wanted it to be a boy, so he said it was a boy, and so I just went along with him. And of course, I knew if I did that I would guess wrong, and of course I did. So I said, "It's a girl. It's clearly a girl." And I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And it was definitely a girl. She was not shy about showing her hamburger, as the tech called it. So I said, "Oh my gosh, it's Molly." And so we named her Molly. Like, I'd had her name picked out for years. And so I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's Molly." Oh, and at the appointment, I forgot to mention this. At my appointment, she was like, "Have you felt the baby kick?" And I was like, "I have. Oh my gosh." Like, I knew that's what it was, but I didn't think I was that far. And so I felt the baby kick before I even knew how far along I was, which means that some people definitely can feel before 20 weeks, whatever that is. I definitely felt her before 20 weeks. I felt her at 14. So now I'm like, any future kids I have, I'm gonna feel them so early. So anyway, so July goes by, everything's fine. But I was still kind of a wreck. I was a nervous wreck until I hit 30 weeks. Because I had a friend that lost their baby at 29 weeks. And so when I hit 29 weeks, I was really scared. But when I hit 30 weeks, it was like all my anxiety just melted. And once I hit 30 weeks, I knew I was fine. So, so I hit 30 weeks, and the months just started to fly by. I mean, I started getting huge. And my tummy, I carried her like completely in front, and people were like, "Are you sure your due date's accurate? Like, because you look like you're not gonna make it to your due date," and blah blah blah. And I'm just like, thanks. She's gonna be late now. And everyone's like, "You're not gonna make it to your due date. She's gonna be born way before November 26th." Yeah, that's what it was. And I was like, whatever. She's gonna be here way after that, I bet. So, um, so yeah. So the fall month, so September rolls around. Oh, and like in September, they found out my thyroid was low, so I had to go to an endocrinologist and be put on this little teeny tiny dose of levothyroxine. And I don't know if it helped or not, but I went from being freezing cold to a furnace in like 2 days. I don't know if it was just because I was that far along in my pregnancy or that or both. But oh, it was such a welcome change to be warm for once. So that happened in like September. In October, I went back for a follow up, and that was fine. And I was like in a lot of pain because I kept hitting nerves, and it was like really hard to walk. And oh, it was just stupid. And they're like, "Oh, are you sure you're okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." So the next couple of months, I worked, and my job I sit, so it was a really easy job to keep and all that. So did that, and then in October, I moved back down to part time and preps for like going because I wanted to go back to work after I had her, and I start work next Monday. So November comes, and I'm just like, her birth month is here, and I was like really wanting her to be a Sagittarius. Like, I have nothing. I don't believe in horoscopes or anything, but I just like the word. And so I was really hoping she would make it to at least the 21st or whatever it is of November. And everyone's like, "Oh, you're not gonna make it? Are you sure?" Blah blah. I'm like, And then like by the end of November, I was just like so done. Like I was back in the ward that I grew up in, so I knew everybody, and everyone's just like, "Oh, how are you? Are you still pregnant?" I was just like so sick of answering the same questions like every week because I'm an introvert and I don't like socializing that much. So I'm just like, leave me alone. I'm pregnant and I'm mad and my feet are killing me because I'm 40 pounds heavier and my feet aren't adapting and it just sucked. And so my due date rolls around and she's nowhere near coming. At 37 weeks, I started getting checked. They're like, "Do you want to be checked?" I was like, "Oh, of course I do." And I was like at a 1. And then like the next week I was at a 2. I was like, "Yay." And I stayed at a 2 and I was really sad. Oh man, I'm like losing my voice. And my due date rolls around and my midwife went on vacation for 10 days, like around my due date, which meant I had to either have her early or have her like a week or two later for her to deliver me. And I was like, "Nah, it's okay. Like, we're just kidding." Um, and so my due date rolls around. I'm like nowhere near in labor. And so but I did have an appointment, and it was with one of the other midwives. There's 4 midwives at the hospital I go to, so obviously they talk to each other. And I had a birth plan. It was a really sarcastic birth plan. They all loved it. Um, Here, have this. So I got seen by one of the other midwives on my due date, and when she put the Doppler on my belly, her heart was like 190. And I was like, "That's weird. It's never been that high. It was always like in the 160s, but it was like 190." And I was like, "Oh, that's not normal." And she's like, "I'm not worried, but I'm gonna send you to labor and delivery for a non-stress test." So I did end up going to labor and delivery on my due date, but it was not to deliver the baby. It was just to make sure that her heart rate wasn't 190. And of course, when I got there, it was not 190. It was in the 160s, like normal. I was having contractions, but I couldn't really feel them. Like the line, like wasn't going very high. People that have had a baby know what I'm talking about. Um, it never went like real high, but like every 10 minutes, I did have a contraction. And they said I had an irritable uterus, so I still don't really know what that is. Um, so every day after my due date was just like, ugh. But she was totally fine. Every day she kicked, every day, all day. Just, like, and if she stopped and I got scared, I'd push on her butt, and like within a minute she'd move, like, "Hey." So, so that was really nice of her to do that. And she was just always moving around, and we could see it from the outside. I could feel it. It was great. She'd like kick my husband when we'd sleep, and all that fun stuff. And I went into labor the last day of November, so I was 4 days past my due date at that point. Although when I went to my anatomy ultrasound, I asked them, I said, "What am I measuring at?" Because I had never known. And she was like, "Oh, you're within 4 days of your due date." So I was like, so by the time I got to my due date, I was like, well, within the 4 days, like she said, could be 40 weeks. And so I went to labor the 4th day of that. So November 30th, I went into labor at about 9 at night, and it wasn't very strong. It was just like basically Braxton Hicks, but they were regular, and I didn't know how it was going to go, so I admitted myself to the hospital. I could have waited another like 16 hours. I ended up having a 26-hour labor. It was not a hard labor at all. It just took forever to get things moving. I did end up getting Pitocin, but not till I was like 16 hours in labor. I had my water broke, but I wanted it broken. And I actually got it broken a lot after I wanted it to be, but whatever, it all worked out. I did get an epidural just because it was going so slowly that I wanted to sleep without, like, contractions keeping me up. But by the time she was born, I pushed her out in one push, and I tore her because I did that. But I didn't care. I had an epidural. I didn't feel anything. And so she was born on December 1st. She wasn't even born in November. She was born December 1st at 11:53 p.m. She was almost born on December 2nd. And I was like, "No, I want you born on the 1st because her grandma, my mother-in-law, her birthday is December 31st. and I thought it would be cool to have birthdays at both ends of the calendar, of the December calendar. And also, December 1st is the 5-year anniversary of my grandma's death, which isn't like that exciting, but I thought it would be cool, like, to have life on a day that a life left, like a life came in, so I did end up getting to have that. The clock was like right there, so I was like, yeah. So my husband, my parents, and my sister all got to witness my birth. They all got vagina shots from down there. I did not film it because they said I couldn't, and I didn't really feel like filming it anyway. So I don't have that. I have plenty of pictures, and I'll probably post a slideshow eventually. But I'm not really going to do a labor and delivery story because this video is 30 minutes long already. But here is Molly. She's hungry and she's like, shut up so I can eat. She is almost 7 weeks old right now, since it's the middle of January already. But yeah, so she was born on December 1st. She weighed 712 and she was 20 inches long. And that was an amazing experience. It was so awesome. She took to breastfeeding right away. It hurt like, words cannot even describe how much breastfeeding hurt, but we did it. We pressed on, and now I can do it without using lanolin and all that, and it's really nice. But that's for another day. That's another video. This video is really long. So there is my second half of my pregnancy journey story. Or if you just clicked on this one, this was Molly's pregnancy journey. I hope I didn't leave anything out. But I didn't vlog about it, which I'm kind of sad about, but next time I probably will. I did blog about it, not like every week, but I did blog about it, so there's that at least. So I'm just going to end this because now I'm just blah blah blah, and so I'll see you guys for my next video. Bye!